Hi everybody, this is Heidi. I've had some requests to make a video about how to make do reversed stamping, and I put that stamping in quotes, with water slide decal paper that I got off of eBay. So the first thing you're going to do is you want to buy your water slide decal paper. This is the kind that I use. I buy it from this vendor called Robin's Etc. And you can see there's the website if you want to buy it direct. She sells it in different denominations, and she sells it for both clear and white and inkjet and laser. I use the clear for inkjet. You can use the white, but your background will be white. I don't particularly see a nail application with the white paper, but maybe you can think of one. So again, I will always get the clear, and I have an inkjet printer, so I buy that. You're going to pretty much follow the instructions on here that come with the paper. I do have some modifications. You don't need to soak it nearly as long as she says, and there are a couple other things that I recommend as well. So let me just show you what the paper looks like. I bought a package of 10, and the back side has a paper backing, and it'll say inkjet clear or whatever, and so you can tell that this is the side you are going to discard. The shiny side is actually the decal itself, and when it's wet, the plastic is going to separate from the paper, and you're going to have a clear, thin decal that you can then lay on top of either a stamper, or I use Wet n Wild on sheet protectors. So this is what the paper looks like, and when you put it in the printer, you're going to put it either face down or face up, depending on what your printer asks for, whatever side it's going to print on. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to make up a document in Word or whatever other word processor you use, and you'll take your Clipart and drop it into Word and size it so that the size is exactly what you want on your nail. Typically this takes me three times where I put the Clipart in. I generally make one of each of about 3 different sizes of each image that I want, and then I print it out on regular paper and cut it out to see how it will look on my nail. So you cut this little baby out and lay it on your nail and say, oh, I think that's a good size. So once you know what you want to do, lay it out on the paper. You can reuse a sheet many times, providing you keep cutting it straight, so that you can actually send it through your printer multiple times, and the paper will just get shorter. So I tend to make about twice as many decals as I think I'm going to need. And I actually just try to maximize. I actually didn't do a very good job of maximizing the space, because this is going to end up being wasted. I probably should have done 6 of each of these, so that all the way up to the margin. The paper's not terribly expensive, but it's not cheap either, so you want to maximize how much of the paper you're using and not let any go to waste. So in this case, I was happy with how I printed them out. There's actually 3 different images on here of these cute little penguins that I'm going to do this weekend. And then you're going to run the paper through. Now, I already cut into the sheet that I printed, because I had made most of these decals before I realized I owed you a video. So what's going to happen is it's going to come out of the printer looking like a full sheet of this. As I said, I've already cut into this. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to just don't touch it. You're going to let the ink dry, and you're going to put it away for I typically like to put it away for at least a half an hour and let the ink completely dry. When you print it from Word onto this paper, go into the properties setting of Word and change the ink quality or the image quality to best. It'll default to normal, but if you go into properties, print properties, you can actually change it so that it puts as much ink as possible onto the paper. The quality of your clip art is definitely going to matter. The larger the image is before you shrink it down, the better. If you start with a very small image, once you shrink it down, the lines are going to be very, very fine, and sometimes they get hard to see and very, what's the word I'm looking for, spotty. where there'll actually be gaps in the lines. So you want to pick a really solid piece of clip art that once you shrink it down still has a nice bold line that you're going to be able to see when you go to paint it. So once you've printed out your sheet onto the water decals paper and let it dry, the next thing you're going to want to do is you need to spray it with Krylon. The Krylon Crystal Clear you can get at any hardware store, Home Depot. You can also buy it at Joann's or Michael's. And you're going to actually use 3 very thin coats of this. Typically you want to spray it from pretty far away, like you would use if you were doing any kind of spray paint, because you don't want it to drip. And also if it gets too liquidy, it will start to puddle and ruin the ink. So I typically use a very dusty coat to start with. I actually will put it down on the floor, the sheet down on the floor of my garage, and spray on top of it from a standing position, or at least a bending over position, so there's an even 2.5 to 3 feet between me, my decal paper, and this. Because what you want to do is you want to create a barrier, but you want to make sure that you don't expose the ink to too much of the acrylic at once, or it will start to run. So I will do that once, a very light dusting, then I'll go back in about 15 minutes and I'll do a second dusting. And then typically once you've done a couple good dustings, you can give it a little bit more of a heavier shot the third time, because presumably you have enough on there that it's not going to run the ink. Just today even, I just did 2 coats thinking it was going to be enough of the Krylon, and when I went to cut this out and put it in the water, I actually got this like purpley haze coming up into the water, which means that the ink is actually not well enough trapped, and you're going to lose your image into the water. So I stopped right away and I resprayed it. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to cut a piece out of your paper. You want to give a pretty good margin around the edges, because when you hold it with a pair of tweezers, you don't want to touch any of the ink. So let me show you how we're going to separate the decal paper. Previously to this, I have used a cup of water, but I actually prefer to use something more shallow, and I happen to have my little ink palette, my little paint palette handy, so I'm going to just use this. I filled it up with water, and the directions say to dip it for 30 seconds. You don't need to do that, and you actually are better off doing less, because it'll be a little bit stiffer and won't curl up on you as much when you try to peel it away. Before I get into the process, because I have to move quickly once I do that, I work on sheet protectors, and I typically put Wet n Wild using the Decal Diva method, where I'll take a sheet protector and put it underneath, and I'll pour out little squares on a checkerboard, and you can actually see that I have some on here that are still good. I have some other decals that I already made, and you let these dry. I typically make them up in advance. Now, one thing that I learned the hard way is that you can't just put the decal paper straight on to the polish. I've had cases where the decal has popped off midweek because I didn't adhere the decal to it, and I made a sandwich that didn't have any glue between it, and the decal actually separated from the base of of what I was doing here. So what I'm using is nail foil glue. You guys know I rave about this stuff. You could also probably put some base coat on here. You just want it to be sticky enough so that the decal stays put and dries to your square polish. I suppose you can also probably do these on a stamper. I don't do it that way, but I don't see there's any reason why you can't do exactly what I'm about to do, but instead put it on a stamper. So what we're going to do is we're going to dip this into the water. Then I'm going to peel the water slide paper away from the paper backing, and I'm going to quickly adhere it to one of these squares of Wet n Wild. And if you look really carefully, you can see that I've already put the nail foil glue on top of the Wet n Wild, and I have let it dry, and it is tacky, so it will stay put and hopefully not separate. Since I've started using the glue in between the slide paper and the Wet n Wild, I have not had any separation problems. So let me just put this down here, and we're going to dip my little penguin in here. I'm going to count 7 Mississippi. And if you look real close, you can see that there is no bleeding. You'll notice immediately if there's bleeding of the ink. You'll see like little purpley black streaks, and that's when you know you need to go back to square one and put on a little bit more of the Krylon. So you can see as of only after about 7 seconds, it'll start to peel off the paper, and I'm going to peel it like this. Now it's going to have a tendency to curl up on you, so you want to move quickly. And I'm going to flip it over so that it's ink side down, and lay it on top of your Wet n Wild that either has glue on it or a little bit of base coat so that it stays tacky. And you're going to go ahead and spread that out. Now the nice thing is that even if there was some ink still exposed and you didn't cover every single part of the water slide well enough with Krylon, we're flipping it over, so the ink side, the loose ink side, is actually now sandwiched between the Wet n Wild and the water slide paper. So that's kind of nice because it essentially protects your stamp, as it were. So when you go to color it in, you don't have to worry about wearing off the ink. So as you can see, there it is. There's the one we just did. It was wet, and it'll clear up as it dries. And here are some more that I did earlier. And as I said, you're gonna pretty much color these in. Now this one I put on when before the glue was entirely dry, so there's a little bit of cloudiness, but again, that will clear up also. So once this is completely dry, and some of these that I made earlier are dry enough, then you can go ahead and paint them the way you would paint a regular decal. Now, one thing that is important is you can see, if I get up real close, you can see that the water slide paper is a little bit smaller than my Wet n Wild square. Once you have painted your decal and it is dry and you're ready to apply it to your nail, you need to trim as much as possible right around the edge of your image as you can. This decal paper is not as adherent, is that a word? It doesn't stick to the nail nearly as well as if it was just straight polish, and so you want a nice margin around the decal before you flip it onto your nail, so that it actually gets to be nicely sandwiched, because once you color it in, you're going to flip it over, and then you'll adhere it with either your top coat, or I use nail foil glue, and then you're going to top coat the entire thing and like seal it in there almost like you were doing a decoupage. But you want to have as much touching polish on the nail as possible, and cut out any excess decal that you don't need, that's not part of your image. So that's it. This is where you would be as if you had stamped it. So now you are okay to either polish it in, color it in with polish, or color it in with acrylic paints, whatever suits you. You can even flip it over, put it on a white nail, and then lead light it. Now typically I will, if I'm going to put it directly on the nail, I'll take another real quick swipe of Wet n Wild and make a nice sandwich if I'm going to put it right on the nail and lead light it. But right now what I'll probably do is I won't necessarily use another coat of Wet n Wild. I'll just start painting right on to that. It's probably smarter to put a little bit of extra Wet n Wild on top of it before I start to paint, I've not had any problems without it, because I don't like it when my decals get too built up. So that's it. I'm sorry this was really rambly. I've never done this before, and I will promise you to get better and figure out how to set this up in a place that's not quite so messy and crazy. Thanks!